Today we are going to continue on Module 3, the parking studies. First, we would like to just make a quick revision for what we covered so far in this topic. So we mentioned that, we need to address parking generation and supply needs, parking studies and characteristics, parking facilities design and location, parking programs. In the last few lectures, we covered the parking generation and supply needs and the parking studies and characteristics. We mentioned the parking generation, the term of parking generation. What does it mean? Parking generation relates to the maximum observed number of occupied parking spaces to one underlying variable that is used as a surrogate for the size of or activity level of the land use. So that's the parking generation factor, what we call. And it varies by facilities. Okay. Then we moved on to the parking studies and the so we mentioned that in the parking supply needs are duration of parking, accumulation rate, proximity of requirements of parkers, and we came to parking inventory calculations. So the parking inventory calculations, it was defined by this formula, which is basically the summation for the number of parking slots multiplied with the time span it's available, divided by D. D, that's the duration, and multiplied by F, which is the insufficiency factor. This is account for turnover values range, and it ranges between 0.85 to 0.95. Then we had an example, and this is the sheet for parking inventory field assessment sheet. Then we talked about parking accumulation, okay, which is defined as the total number of vehicles parked at any given time, okay. And the parking duration, that's basically the parking duration or the length of time that an individual vehicle remains parked in the parking lot. Very simple. And we introduced how we calculate the average duration. Okay, so that's the average duration parking. That's the average parking duration, which is hours per vehicle. And it's calculated using this formula, which is NX, number of vehicles parked for X intervals. X, that's the number of intervals. And I, that's the time length of the interval. And NT, that's the total number of parked vehicles. So it's kind of a weighted average. And here the TR, that's the turnover rate, parking turnover rate. It's calculated using this this equation, and it's basically the total number of parked vehicles observed divided by the total number of legally parking stalls and duration of the study period. That's very simple. These are some examples and sheets for assessment of survey data. And that's an example based on these sheets. And here that's a summary. Basically, parking supply is defined using this equation, and the D, that's the parking duration or average parking duration, is assessed or calculated through this equation. And the turnover is calculated this equation. Okay, so that's going to be it for the parking supply needs and turnovers and inventory. Then we will move on to the parking, the design aspects of parking facilities. What are the design aspects for parking facilities? Basically, we have three objectives, key objectives in the design of parking facility. One, the parking facility must be convenient and safe for the intended users. That's number one. Number two, parking facility should be space efficient and economical to operate. So the size and the number of the parking spots should be feasible for the cost of operation. Okay, because there is usually initial cost, there is fixed costs. Okay, a parking facility should be compatible, okay, with its environments. There should be a compatibility with the surrounding environment. So one key aspect, some basic parking dimensions, which is basically the vehicle dimension. That's one of the key aspects. W, that's the overall width in inches. Okay, L, that's the overall length in inches. That's the length of the vehicle and width. Okay, OR, that's the rear overhanging, which is this part. Okay, that's here. OB, that's the body overhang. Okay, which is from the center of the rear tire. T, F, that's the width from center, okay, to rear of rear tires. So that's the wheel track of the vehicle. Okay. Then there is the minimum. There's a minimum turning radius. That's key factor. The minimum turning radius is critical in designing the ramps and the geometry of the parking facility. Okay, so we have the R, that's the inside rear wheel, and there's the capital R, that's the outside point. Okay, and there's R dash, the outside point rear bumper. Usually in this case, we use some softwares with AutoCAD or Civil 3D to simulate a vehicle driving in the parking facility. Okay, so these are some of the values for the dimensions of the vehicles. So here, for example, that's for a large vehicle, the length in inches. These are in inches. 70, that's the width in inches, 77. The length is 215, and so on. Any questions so far? Okay. Now determining the width of the parking stall. Okay. How can we determine the width of the parking stall? Basically, the parking stall must be wide enough to encompass the vehicle and allow for door opening clearance. The minimum door opening clearance is 22 inch. اوكي، يعني لو في عندي بارك، لو عندي الفيهيكل كده، ده الويدث بتاعها، باخد مينيمم 22 اوكي to 26. هنا بقول لك it may be increased to 26 inch. 22 to 25 in metric units, that's almost the 20 is 50. 26, that's so it's from 50 to or I'm sorry, from 55 centimeter to 65 centimeter. That's additional to the width. Okay. But this may, okay, where the turnover rates are high. يعني in case that you have a high turnover, okay, then you need to use higher clearance. Why? To facilitate easy out and easy in. Okay. شباب اوضح بس النقطة دي. احنا بنختار عرض مكان الباركينج، تمام، بناء على عرض السيارة وكليرنس للباب عشان يفتح. Here what it says, okay, but it may be increased to 26 inches where turnover rate is high, are high. لما يكون التيرن اوفر ريتس هاي، يعني الناس ما بتطولش في الباركينج، بتركن وتطلع بسرعه، تمام، يبقى لازم اخد اخد كليرنس اعلى. ليه؟ عشان يسهل عمليه الناس تركب السياره وتطلع من الباركنج وتمشي بسرعه. واضح؟ only one door opening clearance is provided per stall. يعني انت بتعمل one opening clearance هنا and that's it. ما بتاخدش في الناحيه الثانيه. ليه؟ لان the other side there is another car and it will leave also a door clearance. So passengers here can step out from here easily, okay, and so on. As the parked vehicle and its adjacent neighbor can utilize the same clearance space. يعني ما فيش حكمة انك انت تعمل two clearance space من ناحيتين. واضح؟ فنفس الكليرنس سبيس بيستخدموه السيارتين في نفس الوقت. يبقى for large cars the parking stall width should range between 77 plus 22, which is 99 inches, to 103 inches. 99 inches يعني تقريبا 245 centimeters to 103, that's 265 centimeters. The width of the parking stall should not be less than this value. If it's higher than this value, that's good, but it's not going to be economical. واضح يا شباب الكلام ولا في غموض؟
واضح دكتور.
Okay. Parking stall length and depth. That's very important. So now we are settled with the widths. Now, how deep or length of the parking space for the vehicle? Okay. It's generally taken as the length of the design vehicle plus 6 inches. يعني design vehicle plus 6 inches of bumper clearance. This implies a length of 215 plus 6 inches يبقى 221. يعني يا شباب بناخد الطول بتاع الديزاين فيكل اوكي بلس 6 انشز. ليه 6 انشز؟ ده كليرنس للصدمات بتاعت السياره. يبقى for large vehicle, for large cars we have 221. For small cars okay we have 181. Okay, what does this mean? This means if we are designing the design vehicle, we cannot have two dimensions. We have either this one or this one. Okay. However, in some occasion, in some circumstances, we might, in the same parking lot, okay, identify two categories, especially for hotels and for, tight spaces. Sometimes they have these two categories: small car, large car. Okay. Also in ferries, I think they use the same. They have some spots for small cars and some spots for large cars. You know what ferries are. Okay. So some basic parking dimensions. Stall width, A, that's retail. Okay. Stall width design criteria for various parking classifications. Okay, as you can see, for retail customers, okay, banks, fast foods, other very high turnover, they used high width, the largest width. Why? Because there is a high turnover, so you want customers, they don't waste their time in parking their car in or pulling out from the parking. Okay, and the typical turnover high. Class B, that's for visitors and for for clinic, for something like that, and we use, and this is for high and medium turnover. So we use this stall width, or the width of the parking spot is 8.75. For visitors, office employees, okay, residential, airport, hospitals, drivers are not in a rush, so that's low to medium turnover. We have a stall width 8.5. for industrial, commuter, universities. Okay, because people park their car in the morning and they leave at the end of the day. So we use the lowest parking width, which is 8.25 feet. 8.25 feet, that means 8.25 multiply 2.5 multiply 0.3, that's 2 meters and a half. The 9, that's 2 meters and 75 تقريبا يعني. واضح يا شباب؟ Okay. Now for the parking modules. What do we mean with parking modules? Parking modules refer to the basic layout, okay, of one aisle with a set of parking stalls on both sides of the aisle. Okay, there are many potential ways to lay out a parking module. So الباركنج موديول يا شباب اللي هو حاجه بتبقى زي كده، ده باركنج موديول. اوكي. for 90 degrees stalls، يعني في الباركنج لما بيكون مثلا الباركنج عمودي كده، انت بتبقى ماشي هنا وفي باركنج سبوتس بهذا الشكل، ده بنسميه 90 degrees stalls. يعني عشان تلف ده عامل 90 degrees، انت المفروض تلف هنا 90 degrees. اوكي. two way aisles، يعني الايل ده رايح وجاي كده two directions. Okay, are virtually always used. ده اللي هو most commonly used as vehicle may enter parking stall conveniently from the other approach directly. يعني الناس بتفضل هذا الباركينج على اساس انت بتبقى ماشي هنا وبتلف براحتك هنا، واللي ماشي هنا بيلف براحته هنا، مفيش مشكلة. اوكي. Where angle parking is used, vehicle may enter a stall in only one direction of travel and must depart in the same direction. In most cases, angle parking is arranged using one-way aisles, okay, and stalls on both sides of the aisle are arranged to permit entry and exit from the same direction of travel. Okay, angle stalls can also be arranged such that stalls be on one side of the aisle are approached from the opposite direction as those on the other side of the aisle. Let's have, this is an example of angled stalls. The angled stalls need this aisle to be one dimension, okay, and you park here. If you want to go out, you can just pull back and going in the same direction that you parked. Okay, so here these are the dimensions. Theta, that's the angle of parking. Okay, W1, that's the parking module width. Okay, wall to wall, that's if you have a wall to wall and we have one aisle one side. Okay, W2 parking module width wall to wall double loaded aisles، يعني الايل اللي هنا لود من ناحيتين. W3 اوكي wall to wall interlock wall to interlock، يعني من الوول ده الانترلوك اللي هنا، تمام، ده W3. تمام. دبل لودد ايل، هنا ايل ويدث، ده اللي هو الويدث السيارات ممكن تمشي فيه. تمام. و VB1 that's projected vehicle length. تمام، خلي بالك ان هنا VB1 ده البروجكتد فيهيكل لينث، يعني احنا بناخد، ركز بقى معايا دي حته مهمه جدا، ده اللي هو الطول الاصل اللي احنا بناخده للسياره، وده اللي احنا بنسميه هنا ايه، لو عندي ده هنا L البروجكتد فيكل لينس هيكون ايه؟ ده هيبقى ثيتا، هيبقى L كوزين ثيتا. واضح؟ VB1 projected vehicle length from interlock. اوكي، ده من الانترلوك اللي هنا، سوري، زي ما انتم شايفين هنا كده. VB2 projected vehicle length from the wall اللي هو فوق. S stall length، ده الستول لينث اللي هو الاس ستول لينث اهو. وستول ويدث ده اللي هو العرض تبع الباركينج، تبع البارك الستول نفسها. اي سؤال يا شباب؟ جميل. طيب هنا these are guidelines or some layout dimensions guidelines for large vehicle. For large vehicle, these are the guidelines or the dimensions. If a two-way aisle 90 degrees, this is going to be recommended dimensions. For 60 degrees, 75 degrees, 60, and so on. This is one aisle 45, and so on. Okay, parking module layout dimension guidelines. This is for a small car. So this for the large cars, and this for small cars. This is an example. Okay, what's the angle here يا شباب؟ Okay, ده باركينج في ارينا او ملعب يعني. لاحظ معايا ان ده باركد هنا غلط. Okay, but what is the angle of the parking here؟ 90 degrees. خلاص، يعني هو في كيرف شويه في الايل، تمام، لانه راديال يعني يعني ارك، واضح، لكن هي دي تصنف ان هي دي 90 degrees parking stalls. This is an example. Okay, that's from a shopping center for angled parking. The angled parking, one of the advantage of this angled parking, it's easy to park in and to park out, or to roll out. So here you just make a small turn and you park your car. Okay, but when you get out you need to pull back and go again this way. Okay, as you can see, this aisle had this direction, this aisle the opposite direction, and so this aisle in the middle both ways. Okay, this is another example for this is one directional aisle, this is one directional aisle, this is one directional aisle. Okay, this is another example for two directional aisle, and this is angled parking, and this is two directional aisle also. Okay, so that was for parking lots. Now we are going to talk about parking garages, which is multi-story parking garages. Parking garages are subject to the same stall and module requirements as surface parking lots, and have the same requirements for reservoir areas and circulation. The same what applies to parking lots, it applies to parking garages. And here it becomes even more critical that each inch must be used efficiently, because we are paying a lot of money for these parking garages. Okay, the structure of the parking garage, okay, however, it presents additional constraint. Yes, there's the issue of that we have multiple levels and we have to go between the levels, okay, to access these parking spots. That's a challenge. يعني احنا بيبقى في عندنا باركنج مسطح كده، احنا بنعمل فوق منه ادوار. how to reach to each level in an efficient way, that's a challenge, as we can see now. The ideal module and stall dimensions must sometimes be compromised to work around these structural features. نتيجة الكونسترينز الإنشائية، تمام، مش أحيانا ما بنمشيش ideal للموديولز ولا للdimensions. Sometimes we might violate some of the dimensions. Parking garages have the additional burden of providing vertical as well as horizontal circulation for vehicles. زي ما قلنا السيركوليشن بتاعت الفيهيكلز من تحت لغايه فوق وداخل البارك المستوى نفسه. This is a challenge also. So this is an example for a multi-level parking garage. As you can see, we have angled parking. Okay, but the angle here is slightly less than, I think it's maybe 70 degrees or something. And you can see we have a ramp, okay, one directional, and there is this direction. It can turn here, and this can go all the way. Then goes down. So you have these going in parallel. Usually this at the level below, this becomes, this would be most probably underneath this another ramp here, and there's another ramp here. This ramp going down, this ramp going up. Okay, and usually it keeps alternating between levels. That's a two-way ramp. And as you can see, we have here 90 degrees. 90 degrees stalls. Why we have 90 degrees? Because basically it's designed such that if you are driving in this direction, then you can park easily here. If you are driving in this direction, you can park easily this way. As you can see, the parking spots here, the size of these is different from these. Sometimes we try to tweak the numbers just to, go around the structural constraints issues. For the circulation, that's one important. So that's what we were talking about. That's the layout for the ramps. This for circulation, that's another critical issue. Either we have one side ramp, it's two-way, like this one, or we have continuous circulation, and we have two ramps, okay, or we have a spiral ramp, and we have another ramp here, okay, or we have alternating ramps, like this one. There is, several alternatives to these to the ramp configuration. As you can see here, we have ramp going up and ramp going down. Okay, when you go down, the same repeats again. This is also another configurations for the ramps, and you can see here, for example, this is the going down. It goes this way. The going up going this way. Okay, so it's going up and this going down. That's also similar to this one. And actually both of these are the most commonly used, and even this one also. That's another configuration also for vertical. This one is very interesting. It's just the whole parking lot is just a ramp, and you are going up and down. You can park on the side of the ramp. Any questions so far? Okay, so we are going to conclude the parking studies section with the parking programs. Okay, that every urban governmental unit must have a plan to deal with effective and parking needs. So we have the planning and policy, we have the curb management, we have the construction, maintenance, and appreciation of off-street parking facilities, and the enforcement. What do we mean with this? For example, the curb management. Curb management, that we have the parking on the streets. We don't allow people to park more than the time limit on these streets. Okay? For example, if you park and you fill the meter with coins, you have a limit, which is 2 hours, I think, in most downtowns. If you exceed this 2 hours, despite the fact that the meter you fill it with money, you're going to get a parking violation. Why? Because we need this spot for other users that they can use. Okay? So if you are going to be parking for a long term, you need to park somewhere else. Planning and policy. Okay, the overall objective must be established. There should be a policy for parking and the long-term planning for parking needs and facilities in that area. And actually, the 4-step process gives a strong input in the planning and policy for this planning and policy section. Construction and maintenance and operation of off-street parking facilities. For example, these parkings, okay, needs a lot of maintenance, a lot of management, okay, continuous monitoring for the structural integrity, for the operations, for security, for everything. This is cost of money. Enforcement. Enforcement means that you can have a very good policy, you can have very good regulations from these 3, but there is lack of enforcement. So there should be, especially parking officers for curb use regulations to manage these. Okay? Any questions, Shabab? Okay, we are going to stop here and